Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining the National Rural Women's Coalition and National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Women's webinar on demystifying CSW, particularly for those of you that are interested in becoming a government delegate. As you've seen, both NATSUA and the NRWC have been supporting the Australian government in getting the right applicants for this really particularly special job representing women globally at the CSW. We have some really amazing guests with us today to help talk us through what that experience is like. And we're going to give you the opportunity to ask them questions throughout the webinar. We are recording today because there are a lot of interest in this, but not everybody can be here today given the silly season that's fast approaching. But feel really comfortable that this is, this is your webinar, and it's for you to ask any questions along the way or after of any of the people that are on our panel today. So housekeeping, Wendy and I were going to share co-hosting today, but typical of rural, remote and regional Australia, she is experiencing a few little tech issues. But Wendy, if you want to just give everybody a little bit of a wave so that they can see you. Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate that, and thank you so much for being on here. Ladies, I really strongly suggest that you use the chat. If you've got any questions along the way, just come up, put them in there while they're top of mind. There is a little Q&A at the end of the session, but right now it's really great for the panelists to see what you're thinking about, so put them in. There is no dumb question except the question you didn't ask, so please make sure that you put that in. Before I go any further, Wendy was going to do an acknowledgement to country, but Kaylee, would you like to do that, or are you comfortable if I do that? Comfortable for me? Okay, thank you. The National Rural Women's Coalition and NATSUA would like to acknowledge the country that you're living on here today, so if you'd like to pop that into the chat, that would be fantastic. But we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we stand, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We recognise their continuing connection to country, land and the waters. And we pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us today on this webinar, so thank you very much. I'm coming to you from the lands of the beautiful Kamilaroi in northwest New South Wales. And I wish I could share this beautiful country with you. There's some really exciting stuff happening in Gunnedah at the moment in terms of some amazing artefactual sites and things that are being discovered in this area, and really some strong connection between community and non-Indigenous people happening. So I encourage you all to reach out in the country where you live and come from. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce oh, Wendy, we got sound.
I have, sorry. I'll have to do it on my phone.
Well, the timing couldn't be better. So would you like to introduce the beautiful Kaylee?
I would love to introduce the beautiful Kaylee. Just give me a second while I get myself sorted on the phone. Okay, you've done the acknowledgement, and I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm honoured to be on the ancestral lands of the Gundjemadja people. And I do acknowledge the custodians of the land, elders past and present, and really pleased to be here. Sorry, guys, about all the mix-up. Okay, so Kaylee is a member of the Wiradjuri, Yorta Yorta Bangarang countries of New South Wales and Victoria. She's a fierce feminist and is driven by her cultural values and morals of her matriarchal family and lineage. Kaylee has worked across Aboriginal affairs for the past 17 plus years, I think, and across the non-profit, community control and private sectors. Her interests are in health, social justice, and has diversified her experiences and has provided her with an opportunity to work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities across Australia. Kaylee is a member of NATSUA and is a past board member, and an awesome woman.
Thank you, Wendy. And I'm going to introduce Carol Shaw, and then we'll hand over to our two fantastic guests. So, Carol Shaw, it's such a pleasure to be introducing you. She is Australia's most experienced national human rights and gender equality expert. She's worked both internationally and nationally for many years in the peace and security and women's equality space, making a positive, substantial and sustainable difference to the lives of women living globally. Carol's work has focused on human rights and gender equality as she is skilled in gender policy, international relations, international policy, not-for-profit organisations, government program evaluation, training and development and grassroots activism. Carol's passion to ensure gender-inclusive policies, financing justice, and to address structural barriers to women's access to resources and advancement is widely recognised across the world. The Australian government has previously included Carol in civil society delegates at the Commission on the Status of Women. Today, Carol is going to share with us the history of the Commission and how you can be involved as a civil society delegate, what it means to be a delegate, and the National Rural Women's Coalition and the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Women's Alliance are delighted to be able now to hand over to her safe hands to take us through the next 15 minutes. Thanks, Carol.
Oh, thanks. Wow, that was such an introduction. I'm scared of myself. I'm not going to go deeply into the history because we can do that as a 101, and I think that's out on the web a lot. What I would like to do is I've got a few slides, so I'll share my screen and we'll start also by, let me just put that on too. So what do you see there? I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land and waters which we meet today. I live, work, play on the Wurundjeri lands of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to honour their elders past, present and emerging. And I also acknowledge that sovereignty in Australia has never been ceded in battle or bargain, and that we are on lands that always was and always will be Aboriginal lands. Having said that, why should you be at the table? Why should you go to CSW, which is what the big question is? All of you here, I'm assuming, are wanting to, I have to move it here, don't I? All right, what I want to say is, why is it important to be part of these discussions, to be part of this CSW and to go on to the delegation? Because if you're not at the table, you might not be on the menu, and you will most certainly be eaten. And if you see who's eating, you will see the kind of people that take up the space and make decisions around women's equality. So just, you know, hold that in mind. If you're not at the table, you will be eaten. Antonio Guterres, who is an old advocate, friend, fellow that I've worked with across the years, as he used to head up UNHCR when I did a lot of work with the refugee communities. He's really quite a good leader, and he acknowledges and fully recognises that rural women play a critical role in all of the work that's happening, and especially he recognises the intersections that occur and how Aboriginal and rural women are not often at the table when decisions are being made. Now, this comment that he's put here, that's in terms of climate change and the work that's happening there, but it stands. It's really important for all of you who are in this room to think about stepping up into this space, but also know you're not alone in this space. There are plenty of us here. So, you want to be on the government delegation? What do you need to know, learn, and what do you need to think about? I'm going to go through these slides. Any questions, put in the Q&A, and I'll address them at the end of the session. The Commission on the Status of Women is the only really space for global gender policy. It's a space where you can take your national issues into the global arena, and you can use that arena to make your government make a commitment that you can bring home and then use that decision back at home. I want to say that over 6,000 delegates and gender advocates go to this space annually. It's not a small space, it's pretty huge, and you get very overwhelmed. If you want to be on the delegation, it's important that you recognize that you may be overwhelmed, but that you're really clear on what issues you want to take into this space, why you're there, and how you can influence. Now, don't get all freaked out by this, right? Because what I'm saying is this is what you have to think about. If you get chosen, we are all still here to walk through these steps with you. You're not on your own. And that's the great thing about being part of a National Women's Alliance and being able to be linked in. When I was on the last time I was on the delegation, with Leanne Miller, who's an Aboriginal woman. We went into the space and we were talking about economic empowerment. And when we were in the negotiations, the issue of bargaining came up. Because we had Indigenous women in the room, it did not become a point of letting go. We were able to hold that space. So I want it to be really clear, this space is a space you need to be in. And while you're there, you are a global gender advocate who is able to not only speak to the Australian government, but to work progressively with other advocates from Australia and globally. So there'll be other allies in the room. There will be other allies outside the room that you will need to be able to work with. It's important you're informed, you're connected back to your community in Australia, and you know and you do your best to influence the language and outcomes of CSW. Now, that can take, the first 5 years of my existence working in this space was rape as a war crime. Rape as a war crime. I went for 5 years saying rape as a war crime before it was actually recognized as a war crime. And that's now since moved on into Security Council resolutions. We've got 1325 through, we've got other commissions through. So it's a slow process, but if you can think about what you need to put in there, you're able to actually make a difference in the long run. It's important that you act as an information bridge between CSOs and government. Now, when you go in to be on the delegation, you have to sign papers to say you won't say certain things and you won't do certain things and you won't talk to the media. But that doesn't mean that you can't talk to other members of the Australian delegation who might be able to give you a bit of information around that particular issue. So if you get stuck, there are other friendly people in this space. But the important thing is to show up, be seen. We have fought for this space and we need to be really present. You know, I mean, I don't really have to explain to you why it's important for rural, regional, remote and Aboriginal women to bring voices into this high policy arenas. The issues of poverty, access to public services are unique in every setting. And what we see more than not is one policy fits all in this space, which doesn't suit, we know it doesn't suit women in the rural and in the regional and remote situations. But on representation, and that's what you're going to be doing when you go into this space, it's key that you carry the voices and support of your community and recognise this is not a national arena. It's not a space to criticise or complain about Australian policy and attitudes. It's a space where you have to see the art of the possible and bring back the key messages into the global arena and back to your communities for action at the local level. And I think Kelly's going to talk a little bit later about some of the key issues that the National Rural Women's Alliance is going to be bringing into this space. If you didn't know, the priority theme for this year is accelerating gender equality and empowerment by all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. The priority theme is the one that will be discussed mainly. That is the theme that they will be reporting on, that Australia will be sitting and reporting on. This is a little picture of that's actually a General Assembly, that picture, but you can see how all the governments are in there, and at the top row, that's where all of the advocates are sitting. So there's not a lot of room for civil society to get in the room. So if you are in the room with your delegation, you are already in that space and you're in a much better opportunity to influence.
Carol, sorry, the screen, we're only seeing your slide if you're not at the table.
Oh, really?
And we can see your notes on the left-hand side.
Ah, right. Well, I'm seeing something different on mine. I apologize.
Thank you.
Let me just see what I can do here because it's moving through. All right, let me just move to that. Let me do this. Is that better?
Perfect. Thank you.
How do I move on from here? This one. Right. Sorry, apologies. I hadn't got the excuse of being in the rural space. All right, so this is the General Assembly of the Commission on the Status of Women. So this is what it looks like. You'll see that the government's representative sits at the table, right at the front with their books, and there are 2 seats behind, and that's where the delegates sit. The delegates that go with the Commission, with the Australian delegation or with any of the delegations. The space at the top is where in the gallery there, that's where all of the NGOs sit, if they can get in. That gets very crowded. And so often there's not enough space for the delegation to sit. With COVID, this may have changed slightly. With COVID, they may only have 2 seats at the table and the rest is in an overflow room. That's what they did last year. I'm not sure whether they're going to do that or not this year. But the 2 themes, right? So one is addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. And the review theme is social protection systems. So this comes out of, this is a policy that came out of CSW63rd session. National Rural Women's Coalition were very active in this session and got some very good language from the outcomes document. So if you are thinking of going, check that document, check the agreed conclusions of the 63rd session and get your head around what we were saying or what was said in that, because some very good language came out in that outcomes document that could be repeated or could be adjusted to go into this year's theme. See if I can change this there. All right. So CSW has a process. We are here in the process, as you can see, down in the bottom left-hand corner. The outcomes document from CSW67 has happened. It came out of the thinking from the preparatory panel that will be happening. That happened last year. This year, there will not be a preparatory panel because next year we are going into the Beijing +30 processes, which are a totally different process to the normal CSW. We've already started the preparations for CSW. There is a meeting in the region in February that will be discussing some of the regional inputs into CSW. We've already had the expert group meeting on this thing. So where we are at the moment is we are between the expert group meeting and what's called the 0 draft of the Commission on the Status of Women Outcomes document being prepared. The 0 draft, if you are going to be on the delegation, you should really get linked into the 0 draft as quickly as possible. We're able to facilitate that. I'm using the royal we here, Kelly, because I know that you can get us all in. And so the 0 draft will be coming out soon. It normally comes out towards the end of December, beginning of January. And when I say comes out, it is a draft that goes from UN Women to the government delegations. In Australia, we're very, very lucky. We've worked very long and hard with the Australian government to not only get places on the delegation for civil society delegates, but also to have an opportunity to access and talk to and influence the 0 draft at the national level, which is a really key space because now that space does not happen at CSW. Previously, you had an opportunity to really influence at CSW, but now by the time you get to CSW, that document is pretty much into its final negotiation phase. So if you're going to be on the delegation, learn about the outcomes documents, read them, see the way that they're formatted, and you'll be able to recognize what we can do there. Oh, I've slid back. So we're in this part of the process, and leading in, you've got an opportunity to really get across some of the thinking that we're doing. I don't know why you keep going back to that slide. The program for CSW. Now I'm going to focus this in on the government part, not on the civil society, because civil society go wild, right? We're all wildcats out there. We're all doing these sessions everywhere. We're learning wonderful things, but you're going with the delegation. So you need to focus in. It's a 2-week program. You arrive and you're totally exhausted after a long haul flight, but normally they pay business class, so you're not too exhausted. And you get nice rooms and you get per diems, so you're generally not too bad when you arrive, but you have to go straight into it. Now, you attend the UN with what's called a government accredited pass. So you are part of the delegation. Your pass will have a red D on it, which, and I'm pointing at my pass as I go in. Everyone has to have a pass to go into the United Nations. You get a D pass, which gives you access that other NGOs may not have access to. You can go wherever the government delegation goes. Often NGOs and civil society groups are restricted. So you have to remember that, you know, if you say to somebody, oh, I'll meet you inside, not everyone may be able to get inside. So, you know, remember that with that pass comes a privilege. And the privilege is you have to then keep coming out to talk to us in and out of the room in the second week. So the first week consists for the government of country reporting. So Australia will present its report. They'll take the photographs. I think the minister's going this year. Not quite sure. Normally, she only stays for the first week. She'll not be around much. What also happens is there's a lot of bilaterals and multilateral meetings. Sometimes you're invited in the room, sometimes you're not. They're closed and open sessions, it depends. They're formal meetings between different countries. There will also be NGO briefings. In the past, the NGO delegate on the delegation has been the one to come out and talk to the NGO delegates. So make sure you find out what the NGOs want to know. What is it they really want to know? And how can you best facilitate that discussion? And you be the bridge and the voice to the delegation as well to ask those questions. So, you know, they might not be able to come out of the room, but they were able to answer some questions and you can get in and out. There's also side events. So a side event is something that is sponsored by governments. Australia will probably be presenting a side event this year. They are generally held within the UN building. And they are normally, the numbers are limited, you have to apply to go into them, but they're high-level events that you will be expected to go to, especially if Australia is presenting one. And then there's the communications part, whatever way, you know, it might be a WhatsApp group or it might be some sort of communications that's going on. So week one is all about chest beating. I'm better than you. We are going to do this. We have done that. This is how it all goes. And we are marvelous, right? The second week is when, or towards the end of the first week, is when the real body and business of the work starts. And this is where I sort of cut my teeth. And this is the formal negotiations. Now, I'd just like to remind you that nowadays, it's the mission staff that generally lead in the negotiations of the outcomes document. If there are resolutions, there may be an opportunity to get some language and to discuss in the resolutions. We've done agreed resolutions before on economic empowerment, for example. But this is what happens in the second week. So the second week is there's more side events happening. There's still briefings happening. There's still communications happening. And there's still meetings happening, but generally you are tied up in negotiating the document. And when I say negotiating the document, the outcomes document would have reached probably its third draft by the time it gets to this space. And this is where all of the countries have to agree every word of the document and get it down to a 25-pager rather than a 50-pager, which it might be at the time. So there's going to be a lot of cutting pieces out, moving it around, sitting in groups, talking thematically, talking about populations. So understanding that process is something that we will work you through. There's a lot of us who've done it. So if you go on the delegation, don't worry, don't panic. We will work through with you on that. But that's basically what the 2 weeks looks like. Forget about going out and shopping. Forget about going and seeing New York. You might have a little bit of time in the weekend to do that. But my experience is you'll be so exhausted, you'll want to sleep. I see Kelly nodding her head. So that's it. The opportunities to participate. So as I said, the UN delegation it's the government space. This is where the draft, I've got methods of work in there. Sorry, that's already been done. But the government space for negotiation, we think it might be a hybrid space, as in 2 in the room and some in negotiating outside of the room, which makes it really complex, and it makes your job of running backwards and forwards even more complex. And you're working through the mission, and I want to remind you about the time zone challenges. So anything that needs to come back to Canberra has to come back overnight. So if there's language that can't be agreed, or there's a concept that can't be agreed, it goes back to Canberra for decision, and then it comes back. So that tends to happen overnight. The negotiations go on until, well, towards the end of the week. They go to about 2 or 3 in the morning. So, you know, don't expect a 9 to 5 kind of thing. Expect to be brain dead and very tired at the end of it. You have the side events. I understand there's going to be no virtual side events this year. These are the member states ones. They're a formal part of the UN programme, as I said, and they're generally in the government space. What else is happening? And I've put a big cross through that because normally there's not enough time if you're on the delegation, and that is the parallel sessions. Some of those are virtual this year. Very few will be in spaces, and they're held outside of the UN building. They're normally about issues, I always call them future forward. It's what's coming up, what's going to be happening, how people are addressing it. It's a great place to network, learn, and create platforms of collaboration outside. And that's a very NGO governed space, and it's all covered by NGO CSW, which is the main NGO that coordinates and sets all of the rooms for that. All right, so what I'm going to go into now is actually some of the documents and some of the background to what actually goes into the text. And I don't want you to panic because there's an awful lot and it's extremely complex. The CSW was set up around the critical areas of the platform, Beijing Platform for Action. The Beijing Platform for Action is the roadmap to implement CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And CEDAW has an optional protocol, which Australia has also signed. And as you see, we're covering area 1 and area A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, institutional mechanisms. So A and H are the 2 that are being covered in the priority theme and the other thing. What's also come into this agenda are the overlaps of the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals, as you know, are 17 goals, 169 targets, 231 unique targets, although 12 of them are repeated. And all of these are supposed to have a gender overlay, and some of them do and some of them don't. And the Sustainable Development Goals form part of what's called the 2030 Agenda, and the 2030 Agenda will come quite strongly through this year, I think, because that's its commitment to eradicate poverty and its linkages with the Sustainable Development Goals. But what also feeds into the 2030 Agenda is the financing and institutional part, which we haven't touched on here, but you will see probably in this year the trade unions playing quite a strong role at CSW. So there's a lot of different players come in. There's NGOs, civil society groups, there's academics, there's specialists, lobbyists, everyone. The other thing that's coming in is the COP. Now, COP28 just finished, literally. I haven't had a chance to look at it. It was in Dubai, and this is created to accelerate and overlap and integrate into the goals of the Paris Agreement and the Convention on Climate Change. What also intersects with this is also the committee, on disability. The Convention on Disability will also intersect and overlap with some of this work. But the climate change looks at mitigation, adaptation, again, finance and collaboration working together. So if you're going into, that's, you know, if you're, I think a lot of rural and regional and Aboriginal women are actually quite at the forefront of this and should also be across some of the agreements. What we're seeing is some of the COP language sneaking into some of the civil society and some of the CSW language. So this is kind of how it looks. It's a bit complex. And when it all fits together, we're all feeding this into the Commission on the Status of Women. So the Commission on the Status of Women is at the heart of this. And it's really surrounded by the Beijing Platform for Action, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, the Optional Protocol for CEDAW, the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, you might say, where's generation equality in this? Generation equality is also in there, but it's kind of weakened a little bit. It's carrying the double agenda of the SDGs and the Commission, so it's sort of got an amorphous space in here. And if you want to know about these, you have to look at them from the private sector and government interests, understand what feeds into this process, because there's a lot of push to get language in and to get certain positions in. And I think if we start to, as we start to move into the, alleviating poverty, we can't look at that without looking at some of the private sector and the mining that, take land and challenge a lot of what's happening. So as you see, we've got the trade union movements in there. These on the right are a lot of the documents that feed in. Generation equality, the SDGs, and what were formerly the Millennium Development Goals, because some of those have dropped off. Some of those who will go back even further will remember the Rio Summit. That also feeds through here, but that's going too far back. Then we have the Lima work and its Gender Action Plan. That's a commitment that's already being made, so that governments will be trying to keep their commitments in there, aligned with that. The Paris agreements and the Doha agreements that feed into COP. This one's got the old one of COP26. We've just had COP28. That's just happened. And then we've got the Sendai framework for disaster and risk reduction. Now, because the loss and what's it called, Kelly? The loss and
damages.
Yeah, the loss and damages has just been agreed and the fund's just been set up. There's going to be a lot of fragility around what does that mean? What does that mean for rural and regional women? What does that mean for that? And these documents here are really what feeds into that. So when the loss and damage fund starts being mentioned, they're going to say that's a different process. We don't want to see it here. But if we have it here, it strengthens it at the national level. Okay, this is my second from last slide. Never despair, nil desperandum. There's a lot of things online that you can look at that will help you when you're looking for language, when you're looking at concepts, when you're looking at just what the hell am I doing here? These are online. You can download them as apps. You can get them on your phone. You can have them handy on your tablet if you're carrying your tablet in. They give you a bit of background. The Women's Human Rights Act gives you a lot of language and links it to other documents. So you might be looking for something on women, poverty and land use, and you put that in and it tracks some of that language for you. So it's quite a useful tool. And just remember, you've got this. Whatever happens, you've got it. Breathe in, breathe out, repeat. Left foot, right foot, keep walking. And we are here to have you. Did I go over time or is there any? Is that it?
That's it. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. So I'm going to be relatively quick so I can hand you to Kaylee. But what I was going to take you through is what the government's looking for in terms of a civil society delegate before we take you to Kaylee, who has most recently been that person, and what her journey was and what that experience looked like for her, and any tips you could be to be more prepared for that huge role. So just to be quick, I want to just take you, if you haven't looked at the PDF that's on the NRWC website on what the government is looking for, I encourage you strongly to go through that. To be eligible, you have to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident. You have to be residing in Australia and be able to travel during the time. So it's from the 11th to the 22nd, but I'm assuming, and Kaylee will probably go into that you're probably going a couple of days before, and you'll be leaving on the 23rd. So those dates have to be clear. and you have to put your application through one of the National Women's Alliances. So today there's 2 alliances online. There's NATSWA and the NRWC. To have your application in by the time we've got to then forward it to the government, we need to have it. If you're putting it through the NRWC, we have to have it by Monday noon, New South Wales time. Wendy, what time do they have to have it to you at your office if they're going through NATSWA?
Probably around the same, maybe Tuesday morning at the latest.
Yep. Okay. So for the NRWC, you must be living in rural, remote and regional Australia for that to be, it's one of our priorities on top of what the government's already asked for. And we also want people that have experience around the priority theme. The way we'll be working is that applications will come in, there's a small panel, and then the panel will shortlist, and given time may or may not speak to the delegates, or then put 2 people up to the government. So each of the National Women's Alliances, there are 6 of us, are only allowed to put 2 potential people shortlisted up to the government. Wendy, have you got any different process?
No.
Similar process?
Similar process, yes.
So in terms of the delegates, they're expected to provide advice to the Australian government, including relation to the priority theme and emerging issues that are concerning any of the other civil societies or non-government organisations that are going to be there, both here in Australia and the communities they're involved in, and also from what they hear on the ground when they're actually there. So you act as a bit of a liaison between all of us, the government and the non-civil society, and you help with both the text and as well as in meetings. So it's a big role. Civil society depend on you a lot, and we have really close and meaningful relationships with you. It's a very exciting opportunity, and I'm sure Wendy, but certainly us as well, would be delighted to make sure that there was somebody from either of our alliances on that civil society. So if you've got any questions, make sure. I just understand that the chat might not be working. If you've got questions, put it in the Q&A. But other than that, I want to hand over to Kaylee so that we can hear about her experiences. Oh, Wendy, sorry, unless you had something else you wanted to add.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so over to you, Kaylee, to take us. What was it like? What do we need to know? How can we put in great applications?
Thanks so much, Kelly, and thank you, Wendy, for the intro. I appreciate being here today. I'm not too sure how exactly I'm meant to follow Carol's very comprehensive, amazing slides. I feel like it was an amazing refresher for myself, even going into sort of next year again. So really appreciated that one, Carol, as well. So I'm on Bunurong country here in Naarm. Sovereignty was never ceded, and my respects to any mob who are on the webinar today. So as you heard before, I was a previous board member on NATSWA, and I'm a continuing member with that alliance. So I had the opportunity to go to the 67th Commission for the Status of Women in March. And that was focused on technological change, which I feel like was really fitting, considering we've come out of, 2020 and all of these massive, challenges that we were presented with, and we've had to sort of adapt. So it was actually the first time that they have spoke about any technological change or like addressing it within a gender lens. So definitely a good one to get along to, particularly because my role was there to be able to provide insights in terms of how it's actually working on the ground with First Nations women here in Australia, and all of those barriers that present on a daily basis, and what types of things we could be thinking differently about to I guess improve national policy and I guess those state policies and programs that are out there on the ground to really promote and encourage more active and safe participation, I think, in technology, and ensure that First Nations women aren't really getting left behind anymore within this space. So I just also wanted to reiterate, I guess, what Carol said as well, kind of the really cool analogy. Actually, I hadn't actually heard that one before, but it is so true. It is so important, I guess, to have a bit of a seat at the table or to be at the table, because what I noticed when I was over there was there were a lot of people talking about, you know, First Nations issues and you know, programs and things like that in communities all around the world, but there were not a lot of Indigenous women actually presenting on that. So it is so important to be able to obviously get as many Indigenous women there, but also you know, minority women who don't necessarily have a voice at these sorts of platforms. And just on that, you know, it's so important for those who do have a voice through this process, really kind of clear the way and support minority women to make sure that they're getting their voices heard through there. I do know that there's kind of been some pretty notable you know, blog posts and things like that, kind of calling out, I guess, the lack of diversity sometimes within the UN, as it is kind of, you know, quite a big institution, which is only a very privileged few in some instances get to be there and have a bit of a presence. So, you know, getting as many people there over the next couple of years, I think, is going to be really important. And yeah, look, the other thing, I guess, with that is it really provides you an opportunity to be able to meet a lot of First Nations women or a lot of advocates that are in your space or in your interest area and build those networks up. For me, what was quite amazing is being able to talk with other First Nations women from all around the world and just really recognize and appreciate the shared history that we all have and the challenges that we're all faced on a daily basis, and you know, how we have managed to sort of still be here, still have a presence, and still continue to, you know, fight every single day, and also sort of learning from the innovations and what they've brought in other countries and how we might actually benefit from some of those learnings. So, you know, that networking and that, I guess, empowerment piece, just to be present with other, you know, other advocates who are, you know, obviously very much on the same page as you, but you know, who are also sort of out there in the international arena trying to sort of shape national policy. In terms of, like, I guess the lead up, it can be quite full on. I feel like this period that we've got now, I feel like I didn't have that. So you're very lucky to be getting, I guess, a little bit of extra time at the moment. But it did require a couple of hours a week just to make sure that, you know, you're reviewing all the documents coming through, you're having the opportunity to look at the agreed conclusions, you know, you're attending all of the government briefings so that you're aware of, like, your role and how you I guess can contribute as a delegate, but also understanding the logistics and everything that goes behind with sending so many people across, and you know, making sure that you're connected up with the CSO network. So there's a couple of things happening on the side with that, and getting to know everyone, and it can be full on. So I think, you know, you're in a really privileged position now to be able to kind of plan for some of that and just put a couple of hours aside each week, just noting that sometimes, you know, things just slip into the diary and you kind of have to just jump and respond. But just yeah, keeping note that it can be a little bit full on. It all kind of settles down a little bit. I will get to that a little bit. But all of your pre-reading is so important. So in terms of, I guess, the official duties and I guess the side events and the parallel events and kind of how things can work, you do have official duties. So you are required to be a part of certain events as the government delegate. But also you've got the opportunity to go out and experience the side events. So seeing other governments come together and you know, talking about what they've been doing. Like Carol said, it can be fluffy. It can be, we're doing amazing things, listen to us. And then you kind of walk into a parallel event, which is, you know, usually run off-site, and you hear from, you know, civil society delegates and people who are over there presenting on the issues in their community. You can kind of see the disconnect. So hang on a minute, we're having one conversation over here and we're having a different conversation internally. So that was really, really evident. So it's actually quite fascinating to see. I think with the, you know, the parallel events really give you an amazing picture of how things really translate into practice. So it's so beneficial to be able to get the full suite. So you've got a really comprehensive view of how things do happen, I guess, on the ground at the UN. The other thing I think that was really beneficial for being on the official delegation was having the opportunity to be able to get access to influential leaders, both sort of nationally, but also internationally. Like, obviously the delegation that usually goes you know, those people who are up there making key decisions. So you've got the opportunity to be able to build relationships with them. But you've also got the opportunity to be able to build relationships with leaders in other countries. And I found that incredibly amazing. One particular meeting that I obviously loved was being able to get along with Senator McCarthy. So Malandiri was obviously over there last year and was able to do the keynote address from Australia, which was great to sort of sit behind her there. But just sort of literally the meeting before, I was basically running across town to make sure I couldn't miss that Malandiri's address. But we were meeting with all First Nations leaders who had come together from different countries, and we're kind of talking about, you know, how do we address this better next year? How do we work better together in order to make sure that Indigenous women have more of a voice at this platform? So getting access to kind of, you know, some of those really influential people, I just probably encourage you to use that time very wisely, and to definitely sort of make those networks where you can. You do have sort of dinners most nights, so you probably, you know, be on the go from 8 through until 10. Speaking quite frankly, that's kind of just how it operates. But, you know, you do get to meet and mingle with some really amazing advocates from all over Australia and internationally. So again, that time is just so valuable, and to use that wisely as well. You do have a little bit of time to explore. We were able to get to the Met, and I think we went to Brooklyn Bridge and, you know, a couple other things, but I tell you what, we were worn out pushing ourselves to go and do that. So just be mindful, like I said, of your health and your time, and how much, you know, you want to kind of get out to see things. You don't sort of want to push yourself too hard, because it already is, it is very, very big days. One thing that is amazing when you're there as well is the 4 p.m. catch-ups at the UN building. It's usually down, oh, I can't remember the name of that view, the room, but I tell you what, the view is absolutely amazing from inside of the UN. And basically all the CSOs get together and talk about what they've seen throughout the day, what they've heard, you know, any sort of progression on, you know, what countries are, you know, pointing one way, you know, what's happening with the language. It is just a really amazing time to regroup and kind of get a bird's eye view about what is being discussed across the whole UN, because like I was saying before, you're going to be pretty tied up with some official delegations, but also attending some of those side events and parallel events as well. So having that 4 p.m. catch up with the CEOs is such an amazing complementary opportunity. And I guess with that as well, you know, Helen, who you would most likely meet when we sort of go back, and I'm going next year as well, she's able to sort of run, you know, workshops to make sure that people are feeling comfortable and confident while you're there. And she has been such an amazing support, I think, for everyone who has ever attended. She's like, I don't know, I don't even know what you call it, just an everyday hero, really. But, you know, she's really able to kind of guide and give you a lot of support in terms of, you know, coming up with some of the agreed conclusions and inclusions into that document, but also understanding the nuances and complexities of the UN. It can be a lot different to what you sort of think when you get over there. And it was actually really interesting to hear that UN Women had the opportunity to meet with Antonio. And himself turned around and said, you know, we do recognize that there's elements of this UN and this institution that is very outdated. So change, I think, is probably on the horizon, which is great, but I'm not too sure how quickly that change is going to come around. Things tend to move slow when there's lots of countries involved and you've got differing opinions on lots of things. So the other thing that I want to touch on as well is just the language. It's its own beast. I had never sort of come across it before, except for something like UNDRIP, so the Declaration on Indigenous People's Rights, who is kind of where I'd known it from a lot. But having a look at some of that language and some of the complexities in how that language is kind of shared is yeah, it's interesting. So I'd highly encourage you to get on top of it as soon as you can. The app, like Carol said, absolutely amazing. You're able to kind of go in there, search a topic, and it will come up with all of the language that has been agreed previously on that specific topic. I created a little bit of a cheat sheet as well. So everything that I wanted to sort of understand and influence, I went through all of, I guess, other forums where they've agreed to certain things and kind of, picked out language from there to try to sort of have the opportunity to get it slid in underneath some of the conclusions that were addressing First Nations women. And we were pretty successful with a couple of things. So that was really exciting. Being able to see some of your language and some of the language that is going to be beneficial for the community that you're over there representing is a really positive outcome. What else? I'm very conscious I'm speaking very, very fast. The agreed conclusions, it does start happening in January, and you do get most of the traction in January and sort of February leading up to the UN. It's kind of very, very minor sort of changes and word shifts, and it's not very often that they go and completely scrap and start again in March. So that lead up is super, super important to be able to really shape and influence what you need to get in there at that point. Keep room if you can. Try to guide your time a little bit for some opportunistic catch-ups. Like I said, you're going to be over there with a lot of people who are on your page and probably on your team. So it's so important to make room to be able to go and have some coffees and, grab lunch with someone who you've just met, or, grab dinner or something like that. So really maximizing your networking and network like crazy. I can't even count how many people I kind of met over there, but we've managed to create a bit of a WhatsApp group. So all the First Nations women that we've met, I've managed to kind of continue to be in contact with everyone, and we're planning now for next year. So we've got a couple of parallel events and things like that we are going to hopefully get up and running and make sure that there's multiple voices in the room for that one, which is going to be really exciting because we just didn't see that enough there this year. So hopefully playing a role with having a little bit more of a physical presence is going to start to sort of shift the narrative a little bit as well. The other thing that I'll add really quickly is there is a lot of walking. So I cannot stress enough the quality of shoes that you need to have while you are over there. Plenty of socks. We stayed somewhere that also had a washing machine. So we did have to do washing over there because it is, so cold, you've kind of got to layer up. And then you get into these, these buildings that are absolutely meant for this type of environment. And all of a sudden you're sort of sweating. So, just making sure that you're taking clothes that are versatile, that you can layer, but lots of socks and really, really good shoes. I think we were clocking up, 20,000 steps a day, sort of averaging, sometimes more. So just mindful of that one. Weather can be so unpredictable as well. So I actually got a new jacket before I went, and it probably wasn't warm enough. So, the best jacket that you can probably find, but keep in mind that it is unpredictable. It could be 20 degrees. It was snowing when we were there, but who knows? Who knows exactly? So prepare, I think. I think I'm almost to the end of my spiel, but the other thing that I was just going to add was, I will be there next year. I'm really excited to be getting back. I've managed to, because the last session was actually on technological change, I've managed to make a few inroads with Google. So I'm really, really keen to get some First Nations women over to Google and do a little bit of a session with them, and hopefully extend that out to the official delegation to come along as well. I think it would, be a sort of a great way for everyone to sort of reconnect and kind of loop back to, I guess, discussions that we had last year and where we kind of landed with that. There's going to be a lot of conversation over there around what has happened with the Voice and what is happening in New Zealand at the moment. So, and obviously, what is happening overseas. I'm not too sure exactly how that's going to play out while we're there. I do think there's going to be a lot of conversations and probably some protests that happen, and that does happen over there as well. So you're pretty okay and safe while you're on the delegation. So sort of don't let that sort of deter you. But it can be a pretty amazing opportunity, and I think we've got some questions next, and I feel that we'll probably add a little bit more to how life-changing it could potentially be. So that's it.
Hayley, thank you. We've got 3 minutes, and I know, Wendy, there's one question in the Q&A. Do you want me to call that out?
Yeah, if you would, that'd be great.
So it's actually addressed around your application. So what are the tips to make your application stand out, Jack asks? So I think either Carol or Kaylee could answer this, but I'm going to give you no longer than 1 minute each. Thank you.
Well, I done one in January, so maybe mine's the most recent experience. I'm happy to sort of share that. I saw, Carol, you've been on the delegation since 2010, which is, things might have changed a little bit since then.
Yeah.
Look, I think bringing it back to your relevant experience with the theme, I think is going to be super, super important. It's around alleviating poverty and is it financial institutions, this one, Kelly, I can't remember the exact wording, but you know, kind of understanding how your experience can be beneficial to the delegation. The government loves grassroots experience and case studies examples as well. So when you're over there, you know, having some case studies up your sleeve to say, you know what, this is how it actually plays out in practice. So I think being very prescriptive with your previous experience and how it relates to the theme, but also really important to make sure that you are demonstrating your commitment for prior to the UN, and also very equally important about what you're going to do when you come home. It's not a set and forget. You've got to come home. You've got to continue to have a presence, and what that presence is, it's going to be dependent on your experience over there. Mine was, you know, not necessarily textbook ongoing interactions with everyone that I've met, but I think you've just got to be sort of open-minded about, you know, the role that you're going to play when you get back as well.
Thank you.
I agree with that.
Carol, did you want to add something?
I would agree with all of that. I prefer not to be on the government delegation because I find it very restrictive for the work that I do, because I do a lot of work regionally as well. But I think the other thing is to be able to recognize it's this local to global, because you might be bringing something very strong from the local level, which is really relevant. It's the lived experience, and it's how does that reflect at a global level. So, and how do you then bring it back? So I think it's that link. If you can demonstrate that you understand that link, it's something else. Often the government will have an idea of who it wants as well. So, you know, don't feel too disappointed if you don't. There's always next year, and there's always another try at the apple, you know.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to remind you that applications need to be in the NRWC by Monday noon and at NATSUA by Tuesday noon.
Yep.
If you've got any questions about that, contact either Wendy or myself. I've put a link. I'm just about to put a link in the chat, but it's on the NRWC website. If you go in under international, and then you'll actually see a whole page for the expression of interest if you want to go there. But NATSUA and NRWC have it both on our socials, so you can click through our socials. I encourage you all to apply. As you can hear, it's a pretty exciting and dynamic experience, and it really lifts rural and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women wherever they may live at that level. So a very exciting opportunity. With 1 minute past, I'm going to hand over. This video has been recorded and will be available on both our websites, probably not till Monday. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Wendy for closing comments. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. There was another question. Just quickly, can they apply on both of the alliances too? And yes, you can. There's no reason you can't. Thank you, everyone, for your input today. It's absolutely amazing to hear a lot about the process of CSW. I found out things that I didn't know, and I've been involved in doing this sort of thing for a while. Never been, so maybe one day. So I'd just like to thank you all for coming, and get in touch and have a conversation if you'd like. Both myself and Kelly would be more than happy to answer any further questions, or just to have a chat about what you think if you think you might be interested. So thank you very much, everyone.